Hello everyone, I'm really happy to be here at the Babel Flute Day. Today I would like to introduce to you Luigi Hugues, an Italian flutist, composer and geographer from Piedmont, which is the region where I'm from in Italy. Here is a picture of Luigi Hugues. Luigi Hugues was born in Casale Monferrato, which is a town not too far from Torino. He was born on October 27th, 1836. His father was a wealthy merchant in fabric and clothes of French origin. So that's why the family name Hugues is not really a typical Italian last name. We don't have much news about his early years or his musical formation. We know that after he finished high school, he moved to Torino to join the university. He joined the university in the Department of Science and Physics. Torino, which is also my hometown, was a very important city at that time. It was the capital of the Savoia Kingdom and was a city full of life with an active musical scene. In the city, there was the Royal Opera Theatre and there was also the chamber orchestra of the king. During his years as a university student in Torino, Luigi Hugues probably studied flute with the Camillo Romanino. Camillo Romanino was the principal flute of the chamber orchestra of the king, and he was also a good flute teacher and published several compositions and flute methods. Again, while we have no certain news so far about his formation as a flute player and as a composer, we do have news about his performances around Italy and abroad during this period of time. While he was a student, he also took some time off and he went around giving a lot of flute recitals. Most of the concerts were in duo with his brother Felice Hugues, who was also a flute player. Both of them could play piano as well. So very often during the concert, they would exchange roles. This duo often play with Costantino Nigra as well, which was an amateur flutist but also an important political figure in Italy. He will become a future statesman of the Cavour's government, the first government of Italy. Let's have a look at this painting. In this famous painting, we can see all the three members of the trio. Luigi Hugues is the person standing on the right, is the one that doesn't hold the flute. So probably during this concert he was the pianist. Now the person in the middle is Felice Hugues, is Hugues' brother and is holding a flute, and the guy on the left is Costantino Nigra. So as you can see, the two people on the left and in the middle, they are holding the flute. And if we look a little bit closer, we can notice that this is a Ziegler flute. So quite a modern flute for the period that in which this painting was taken. Now, even though all these concerts were very successful, Luigi Hugues didn't like to travel and didn't like the life of a concert artist moving continuously. He preferred the quiet and peaceful life in his hometown, Casale Monferrato. So, at the age of 25, Luigi Hugues also started writing some works for flute. And in his music catalog, we now have more than 100 opus numbered, which contains works for flute and piano, two flutes and piano, solo flute, wind ensemble, and sacred music. Now, it's important to remember that the flute and music was always considered by Luigi Hugues as a hobby. He always referred to himself as an amateur flutist, even though he was very, very talented. This is because his main field of study was geography, which he studied for all his life and published very important books and articles on the subject, becoming one of the major experts in Italy and probably in Europe as well on the subject. Later in his life, he also became a professor at the University of Torino. But now, let's go back to his life. So, in November 1859, Luigi Hugues returns to his hometown, Casale Monferrato, as a professor of geography and inspector at the Istituto Tecnico Leandri, which is kind of the equivalent of a high school. He will work in the school for almost 40 years as a professor and later on as a dean of the school. And while in Casale Monferrato, he started teaching flute at the Civica Scuola di Musica, which is the music school of the town, becoming dean of the music school later on from 1863 to 1883. He was also the artistic director of the town's theater, as well as the director of the city musical wind band. And then during his free time, he also played the organ in the church of Santo Stefano and composed many sacred works. So he was very, very busy. That's why maybe he never married. It is important to remember that for most of his life, Luigi Hugues was a teacher. Either a geography teacher in his hometown first for about 40 years and then in the University of Torino as a geography professor, or a music teacher in the City School of Music. So a lot of his production is for educational purposes in both fields. He published a lot of textbooks on geography to be used in high school, middle and elementary schools, as well as more complex books for university students. He did the same for the flute. We can find autonomous didactic series that cover all the school levels. So we can find a lot of methods written for beginners and method written for advanced students as well. Most of these exercise books that he published, they are all coming from his experience as a teacher in the Casale Monferrato Music School, where he had many students and the students were at different levels. Let's not forget that the most advanced student had to play in the opera theater of the town or in the wind band of the town. Probably his most flute method is what is called La Scuola del Flauto, Opus 51, the flute school. Today is printed by the editor Ricordi and was used in even today in the music conservatory in Italy. I remember that when I was a student in Torino, the Torino Conservatory, I also used this method like everyone else did because it was in the official program for flute. So, let's have a look at La Scuola del Flauto by Luigi Hugues, Opus 51, for two flutes. This is a method that is written in 4 volumes, and it is written in the form of a duet. So each of the 4 volumes has 20 duets with increased difficulty levels. So the first duet of volume 1 is very easy to play, and then it gets harder and harder. Generally, the first volume is for the first year, and the second for the second year, and so on. So let's have a look at the book itself. So this one is the volume number 1, the first duet. So as you can see, it's a duet. The student has to play the top line and the teacher has to play the second flute. And then you can look also at other duets. You see that the teacher part doesn't really change, always pretty much stays the same, doesn't get harder or anything. What changes is the first flute part, so the one that the student have to play. So let's have a look at the first duet. So it's Andante mosso, and then as you can see, the range is not that big. So the highest note that you have to play is the B here. And it's relatively slow. Then you already keep going on. You have the duet number 2, and you have higher notes. You have the Fa, for example, the F here. Then the number 3 is in 3/4, and then the number 5, you have all this staccato articulation, and is also getting a bit longer. So number 6 is in 3/8. And so on, just to have an idea. If you are interested, you can go to the IMSLP website and you can find all the 4 volumes of La Scuola del Flauto Opus 51, so you can download, have a look for yourself about this flute method. So this method, which I particularly like, is not only useful for developing the flute digital technique and sound, but it is very important for playing a beautiful line and melodies. So let's remember, these are duets. They are not exercise. They are not studies. So in a way, they are not as intense as the exercise or some studies can be. A precise articulation and a beautiful constant sounds throughout all the registers is more important than the digital technique. Even though in every duet you can find 2 or 3 spots for fingers. Also, I want to say that all the duets are in this cantabile style, that is typical of the Italian school. So the student have also to learn about phrasing and carrying the lines over several measures. As you can see, for example, here, you have a 4-measure phrase. Hello again. I hope you really like this short excursion into La Scuola del Flauto to have a look at some of his duets. So, because of this method, Luigi Hugues also won an important prize. In 1881, during the Esposizione Musicale Internazionale, International Music Exposition in Milan, he won the silver medal for the high quality of his work. And the jury that awarded the prize was composed by very famous Italian musicians of the time, like Ponchielli, Mariani, Piatti, Torriani, and many others. Luigi Hugues wrote, as I said before, many works for the flute, many fantasies on opera themes. Again, let's remember that Hugues was contemporary of Giuseppe Verdi. Plus, he was the artistic director of the opera theater in his hometown, so he had a constant exposure to the latest opera. So he composed a lot of fantasies on theme by Verdi, Rossini, Wagner, Boito, Franchetti. He also composed original works for flute and piano, chamber music for wind ensemble, like the quartet for flute, oboe, clarinet, and bassoon, for example. He also composed many works for 2 flutes and piano. The most famous is the fantasy on the melodies of from taken from Il Ballo in Maschera by Giuseppe Verdi, that was first recorded by Jean-Pierre Rampal and Stallman. If you are interested in other works for two flutes and piano, you can check the recording that I made a few years ago together with the flutist and musicologist Maurizio Bignardelli. It's available for free on Spotify. I can give you the link. And we recorded all the other fantasies for two flutes and piano. So we recorded the two fantasies that they are based on the melody of Verdi's Aida, the fantasy on the Ione by Petrella, and then the fantasy on the opera La Favorita. So, if you have time, I hope you will enjoy that recording. Now, about the compositions of Luigi Hugues, there has been a major discovery last year. Several manuscripts, most of them unpublished, were found by the violinist Bruno Raiteri. Over a phone call that we exchanged recently, he told me that he found many more works, both for flutes but also works for strings, and there are sacred works as well as a string quartet. So, in the next few years, all these materials will be analyzed and published, and perhaps we will have a better understanding of Luigi Hugues in the near future. I hope you enjoy. See you soon. Bye.